That evening began like so many others in our small home, quiet and unassuming, with the sun sinking behind the horizon, and the house filled with the soft hum of everyday life. I remember standing by the window, looking out at the faint orange glow, thinking about how the day had slipped away in a rush of chores, conversations, and unspoken thoughts. My son Daniel was in his room, as usual, absorbed in his own world. For years, I had thought of him as shy, withdrawn and reserved. He was never the kind of boy to speak too much, never the kind to laugh loudly or run into my arms without hesitation. He lived in silence, a silence I had long mistaken for distance. But that evening was different. That evening became the night that changed the way I saw him forever. The moment it began felt small. I had knocked on his door, carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. I told him I had made one for myself and thought he might like the other. He looked surprised, almost startled, but he set his book aside and smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom," he said in a voice that seemed softer than I remembered. His words carried weight, as though the simple act of me entering his room and offering him tea was something unusual. And perhaps it was. For too long, I had kept our interactions short, routine, dinner at the table, a good night wish in passing, questions about school answered with one-word replies. But sitting there on the edge of his bed with the cup between us, I realized I had not truly sat with him in months. We sipped in silence at first. The ticking of the clock on his wall filled the air. My eyes wandered around his room, the posters of places he wanted to visit, the books stacked neatly on his desk, the sketches pinned on the board above his bed. That was the moment I noticed something I had overlooked. His world was rich with imagination, with longing, with pieces of himself he had never shown me. I felt almost ashamed for not noticing sooner. Finally he spoke. "Do you ever think about how people change, Mom?" His question came out of nowhere, yet it carried the weight of years behind it. I blinked, caught off guard, and asked what he meant. He stared at his hands, then said, "I feel like people look at me and think they know who I am. They think I'll always be quiet, always be the kid in the corner. But I'm not sure that's me anymore." The words struck me in a way I couldn't describe. I saw, for the first time, that my son was growing into someone I had barely taken the time to know. He wasn't just my little boy anymore. He was searching for himself, fighting to be understood. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but instead I asked him to tell me more. And he did. That night, he opened his heart like never before. He told me about the loneliness he often felt, sitting at school with people who only saw him as shy and never tried to go deeper. He told me about the dreams he had, traveling to cities lit with lights, painting pictures that spoke more than words ever could, meeting people who saw the world differently. His voice grew stronger with every word, and I sat there in awe, listening to a young man I barely recognized but who had been living under my roof all along. I found myself confessing things too. I told him how often I worried I had failed him, how I feared my distance had made him retreat further into himself. I admitted that sometimes I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us, that I loved him more than anything but often struggled to show it. His eyes softened as he looked at me, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were not mother and son divided by silence, but 2 people meeting in the middle, both vulnerable, both seeking understanding. The hours slipped by as our tea grew cold. The house outside his room fell into quiet darkness, but we didn't notice. He laughed at moments he remembered from his childhood, stories I had nearly forgotten. His first drawing that I had stuck on the refrigerator, the day he tripped in the garden chasing butterflies, the time I sat with him under a blanket during a thunderstorm. His laughter was deep and warm, and I realized how much I had missed hearing it. Then, in a moment of stillness, he said something that will never leave me. "Mom, you've always thought I was shy, but the truth is I was waiting. I was waiting for someone to really see me. Tonight you did." My throat tightened. I wanted to cry, but instead I placed my hand on his and whispered, "I see you now. I always should have, but I see you now." That small touch, that simple exchange, carried more love than any grand gesture ever could. We stayed there, talking about everything, his fears, my regrets, his hopes, my promises. He told me he wanted to travel after finishing school, maybe start somewhere new. I told him I would support him no matter what, that he had my blessing to chase whatever made his heart come alive. In that moment, I saw not just my son but a man with dreams, courage, and depth. When midnight came, neither of us felt the weight of time. It was as if the night itself had stretched to give us space to heal. For so long, I had looked at him as a child, someone fragile and needing protection. But that evening, I saw his strength, his vulnerability, his quiet courage. And in doing so, I realized how much he had been carrying without me. The next day, the world went back to its usual rhythm, breakfast on the table, errands to run, the hum of life pressing on. But I was changed. Every glance at him reminded me of that night, the moment I chose to listen, and the moment he chose to share. It became a turning point, a silent promise that I would never again let distance grow between us. Weeks turned into months, and the bond we forged that evening deepened. We began talking more often, even about small things, the movie he watched, the painting he started, the book I had read. Each conversation built a bridge stronger than the last. And though life was not without challenges, that bond carried us through. Even now, years later, I think back to that one evening. The memory is etched into my heart. The glow of the lamp, the untouched tea. The way his voice trembled at first and grew firm as he let himself be seen. That night taught me that love is not in grand declarations or elaborate gestures. Love lives in listening, in being present, in choosing to see the people who matter to us. And so, when I look at my son now, I do not see the shy boy others once mistook him for. I see the man he is becoming, the heart he carries, the light he holds within. And I know, without doubt, that one evening changed everything. That one evening reminded me what it means to love, to understand, and to never take a single soul for granted again. Because love is not always loud. Sometimes, it is a quiet cup of tea shared in a dimly lit room, where silence gives way to truth, and truth becomes the bridge between two hearts. That is the night I will never forget. That is the night my son changed how I see him forever.